Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Airlines. Today I am here to talk about 200 scale, which is obviously a departure from the norm because I'm mainly a 400 scale collector. Having said that, I've recently been collecting a little bit more 200 scale. I've picked up 2 or 3 models in the last few months. So I've probably got, I don't know, 10 or so 200 scale models now. But how many 200 scale models can you own? They're so big. And I've already got nearly 3,400 scale. So forgive me, 200 scale people. I am interested in the scale, and it looks like I'm going to have to be more interested in the scale because NG models now appear to be branching out into 200 scale in a bigger way than they have previously. So in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about NG's dabbling in 200 scale up to this point, and I will also announce the latest NG models 200 scale mould. So if you really can't survive me talking a bit about what NG have been up to in 200 scale until now, then jump towards the end and you'll see what the latest mould is going to be. It is certainly a departure from where they have been operating in this scale until now. First off, I want to really thank NG Models for their trust in me. My relationship with them has been really nice. They're so easy to work with, and unlike certain manufacturers that you all know, they like criticism. They like putting things out there. They want to help people. They want to please. They want to make changes based off of feedback. So they've been a joy to work with, and I really appreciate their support. I also, really appreciate them sending me these samples, and I am the only person, I believe, who gets these samples at the time that I do, this early, and gets the opportunity to announce these. So thank you very much, NG. Really appreciate that. If you're interested in finding out what brands like NG Models and Aviation 400 and others are doing in the scale, then you should be subscribing to this channel. So make sure you do. My understanding is that this is not going to be the only 200 scale mould announced by NG Models this year. So subscribe to the channel and you will be first to find out more about that kind of thing. Also, check me out at Yesterday Airlines on Instagram and Facebook. And obviously, yesterdaysairlines.com is the place to discuss and find out information about die-cast model aircraft. Mainly in 400 scale, but also in 600 scale, and now increasingly in 200 scale too. So keep an eye out for those things, okay? There will be plenty of new content coming in both 400 and 200 and even some 600 scale in the future. Okay, but first off, as I said, I want to have a quick look through what NG have been up to in 200 scale. So that's where we're going to start this video, and then we'll move on to the new announcement at the end. So NG Models have primarily been active in 400 scale since 2018. They've produced now thousands of models, and they're really becoming a major force in the scale, producing pretty much as everybody else combined in a month. In some months, it's really been very impressive, and they've been producing a large number of new molds. Their activity in 200 scale certainly has not been anywhere near as impressive, but they have been dabbling for a long time, and it certainly, from what I'm hearing, sounds like 2023 is the year that NG Models will start expanding in 200 scale extensively. They've told me that there will be multiple new molds in this scale this year, and they're ramping up new production facilities for those models. So that strongly suggests to me that they are looking to become a force in 200 scale as well as they are in 400. And that can only be good for the collector, because in reality, NG have been good, haven't they? More than good. The models they've produced have been excellent. The way they've engaged with the collectors has been grand, and the result has been a swathe of really impressive models and some grumpiness from legacy brands, shall we say. So that is none of our business, in a sense. All we should care about is the quality of the models NG have been producing. But I would say that I like NG. I like the way they work. I like what they've been doing, and they deserve success for their approach to dealing with collectors. So I assume that will be something they'll continue on into 200 scale. And if you're not too familiar with NG models, it's well worth checking out their 400 scale output to give you a look into how they're likely to operate in 200. But NG have been in 200 for a long time, and actually, if you look back through what they've made, then some of their very earliest models were 200 scale, though they were branded as HYJL wings all the way back in 2017. So actually before NG kind of became apparent in 400 scale, they were producing 200 scale molds for HYJL, and they were the Bombardier CRJ. So that was their first 200 scale mold, and it's a really, really nice mold. And that is their most prolific mold in the scale so far. They've produced a decent number of CRJs, though it is still the case that they're producing probably only a few every couple of months. They nonetheless have produced 64 CRJ 100s and 200s over the past 6 or so years. So not a tiny number, but not enormous either. And you have to say that broadly they've all been looking really nice, and I'd be surprised if you were a 200 scale collector, especially of American Airlines, and you didn't own a few of these 200 scale RJs, because they're producing some really cool efforts like Mesa Airlines and Air Transjet Connect and Independence Air and Midwest and that kind of stuff. In fact, they're really nice. I probably should be collecting more of these myself, but I'm not. Stop yourself. I really need to keep focus. But looking through, there's some really, really good stuff in that space, and they continue to release some nice output of CRJs. But they're not the only 200 scale mold that NG has had. They also have had quite a focus, unsurprisingly, on Chinese airliners, and in 2018 they produced a Comac C919 mold as well. And this one has not seen a great deal of activity, I admit, but that's not surprising because the C919 has not seen a great deal of production until this point, and then the first one's only just gone into service with China Eastern, and that model has actually been made in 200 by NG. They've also made a few of their Comac house colours as well. So they've only made 4 C919s, but presumably that mould will see more activity as the type enters full-scale production and service. One of the things that NG has focused on in 200 scale is aircraft types that can't easily be made in 400 scale. So back in May, June 2019, they announced a couple of bizjets, which were the first 200 scale samples they sent through to me here at Yesterday's Airlines. They produced both a Gulfstream G550, which is a super attractive and surprisingly large private aircraft for 200 scale. And again, they've been using that mold reasonably regularly, but not enormously so. There have only been 12 models produced on it so far, I believe. And just checking through the listings here, there may have been a couple of others that are put as different versions of the Gulfstream. No, I think it's only that many. And so, not huge numbers, but nonetheless, considering it's a private jet, that's not a dreadful output. I would imagine that private jets don't get the same kind of, or people aren't so excited by those. But the ones they produce, Mexican Air Force, quite a few Air Force related ones, and a few private individuals as well. The other mold that came out pretty much the same time was the Dassault Falcon, and this one was the 7X. And they've produced 9 versions of that aircraft as well. So they've produced a few models here and there, but not a dramatic output. The other 200 scale molds they've made have both been Chinese types again. Obviously, NG is keen on the Chinese market, it's keen on the domestic market, obviously proud of Chinese manufacturers. So they've also sent me through a Comac ARJ 21700 Jian Feng. That was in November 2020, so that's quite a while ago that mold was produced. And again, they haven't used it dramatically. They've only used it for 5 models actually up to this point in time. OTT Airlines, one in the house colours for an air show, and then we've got China Southern, an Air China, and a Chengdu Airlines in the same livery as they produced in 400 scale. So not a dramatic output on the ARJ mould either. And most recently, the newest 200 scale mould, and probably one that least matters to collectors in the West, is the AVIC AG600M, the Kunlong, the amphibian, which is a spectacular looking aircraft. And if you didn't check out my reviews of that sample in November 2022, then please do so both on the website and here on YouTube. I've also done recently a snapshot video of the first release of that as well. It's a really interesting and unusual aircraft, but clearly when you look through the molds that they've made here, they're all reasonably niche products. I mean, the CRJ is quite important, but then you've got 3 Chinese types in the C919, the ARJ21 and the AG600, and you've got the 2 private jets in the Gulfstream G550 and the Falcon 7X. So they've just been dabbling really in 200 scale, and in total NG has really not had a dramatic output here. If you're looking at 200 scale, I think that NG have only announced so far just around 100 models. So not really very many when you take into account how many they've made in 400 scale. But, as I say at the start of the video, things look like they're going to change. This new mould, which I'm just about to unveil, is not such a niche product. It is not a little regional jet. It is not a Chinese airliner. It is not a private jet. It is a mainline, mainstream American airliner. So that is a significant change for NG in 200 scale, and one I think that will be welcomed by 200 scale collectors, even if they don't necessarily welcome the mold. And it'll be interesting to see and understand people's reaction to this mold announcement. So this is a big change for NG, and as I was saying earlier, it's not the first 200 scale mold, or it's not the last, say, 200 scale mold that they're going to announce this year. There will be more. So it seems like NG are really looking at pushing into the bigger scale in a big way. So, with all of that, let's get on to the announcement portion. So here we are. NG have sent me through 2 models of this aircraft type. Both of them have different engine and wing variations on them, which enables a wider range of production. So that's not unusual. That's exactly what they did with the 737s and the A320 series in 400 scale. But this aircraft is not an A320 or a 737. It's a little bit bigger than that. And I have to say, this is an aircraft which is both close to my heart and close to the heart of NG models as well. It's close to my heart because it's an aircraft which I saw a lot when I was a kid. I used to go to Heathrow, you'd see these landing constantly, and you thought, you know, it's another one of those, God, can we stop? But now you miss them because they're no longer there. And at Gatwick, they were so popular with charter airlines. You'd constantly see them, beautiful aircraft in loads of varied, colourful liveries on their way to the Med. And an aircraft which has obviously had a significant second lease of life, operating much longer haul routes, especially transatlantic, with the wingless attached, and operating for carriers like United on routes that previously it would never have serviced. So it's an aircraft which has shown real versatility. It is one of my favourite aircraft of all times. And as I say, one of NG's too, clearly, because back in 400 scale, the first brand that, or the first mould that was branded as NG models was exactly this aircraft type. And I'm sure by now you know what type that is. It is the Boeing 757-200. So this is a type which does have a reasonable representation in 200 scale already. There have been quite a reasonable number of them made. So in that regard, NG are jumping straight in to the competitive zone here. If I look at 200 scale as a total, there have been over 300 757s made, but you've got to take out a lot of plastic versions from that. And if you look at the most recent molds, which is in-flight, and the Gemini JC molds, then in-flight have only made 36, though I get the feeling it's probably the same mold as Aviation 200 made 12 on as well. And Gemini and JC have made roughly around 100 aircraft. So we're looking at probably about 150 or so releases on the 757 in 200 scale. And the existing molds, to be fair, both look pretty decent. So it is not necessarily the case that they're bad molds. But the NG mold, as you will see when I finally get around to doing the review video, is a strong contender. And in 400 scale, NG have already made 183 757 releases. So there's clearly plenty of space for more 75s in the 200 market when you've only had 150 or so made at all. And I'm sure there's already quite a lot of crossover in the releases between in-flight and Gemini JC. So that's it. It's the 757-200, people. It's the first large mainline airliner that NG models have made in 200 scale. It will not be the last. And it does look like NG will be branching out into the bigger scale in a big way in 2023. Okay, cool. I will be following this video up with another video giving a much closer look at these 757 molds. So keep an eye out for that. Should arrive really quickly, probably in the next day. So you'll be able to get a much closer look. But I'm keen to hear what people think about this announcement of the 757 as NG's first mainline foray into 200 scale. For me, it's quite interesting. Even though I'm not a 200 scale collector, I do love the 75, and I could see a couple of these joining my collection easily. So it'll be interesting to see what their first releases are like. Interesting to hear what you guys think on this release. And as I say, stay tuned at Yesterday's Airlines for a close-up look at the samples. I'll see you soon.